This video contains spoilers, so you've been warned. So we just finished Phantasy Star 4, and I figure, hey, let's make a tier list. So the criteria for the tier list is basically how much I like them as a character, and how much they perform, how well they perform in battle, and also how well they perform the role they're designed to do in battle. So we've got our characters down here. I think they're in alphabetical order. They are in alphabetical order. And we'll just get right into it. So, starting with Alice. So, Alice as a character who performs in battle, I'm always underwhelmed by her. And that makes sense. She's an intro character. She's not supposed to be too strong. I mean, when you start the game, you have a level 1 Chaz, and then a level 1 Han, who are super weak, and Alice is just basically there to guide them along, basically to have hit points and not get run over. I've never been too much into her damage ability. She carries a boomerang, which allows her to hit multiple characters at once on the screen. She can equip another set of boomerangs as well, so she can throw 2 of them. That will increase her damage output. She, unfortunately, sadly, tragically, does not make it to the end of the game. Now, she is a character. She's a wonderful character, but her performance in battle, I think she's supposed to be as a ranger. She has some damage spells, she has some buff spells, but I tend to find that she's rather lacking in a sustained role. So I'm going to come in, and we're going to put Alice as a B. If this was based purely on her character, she's probably an A, and if this was based purely on her battle abilities, she's probably a C. Our next on the list is good old Chaz. So, the thing with Chaz, I think Chaz is the only character in this game who has a character arc. He starts out as a whiny, somewhat snivelly character in training, a whiny teenager, so to speak. And as the game progresses and he faces hardships, he actually starts to evolve as a character and eventually morphs into, it takes him a long time to do it, but he does morph into a bit of a good, typical JRPG protagonist, which can seem a little shallow, but everyone else in this game is written so well, so I think having just that character arc for him is very good. As a character in battle, Chaz, I feel, is rather middling for a long time. You can equip both swords and daggers and a shield. So theoretically, you would think if he could take daggers and a shield, he'd be an okay tank character. But the problem is that's never really supported long-term in the game. Eventually, you just start getting two-handed swords. The end-game weapon is a two-handed sword, so they just push him to be a main two-handed sword attacker. He does have some support magic, some direct damage spells, but not to the point where it's what he's going to be doing mostly in battle. Mostly in battle, he's going to be attacking with crosscuts and other melee attacks. He can heal in a pinch. I feel like, for most of the game, Chaz is a B character. But then he gets the Alcidian at the end of the game, and it kind of fixes his one problem I have with him, which is his damage output. So, if we had the Alcidian all game, Chaz would be an S tier character. I think we're going to put him right at the top of the B character list. Next up on the list, we have Demi, the first android you're introduced to. The androids Demi and Ren, are primarily tank characters. But I'm never too smitten with Demi. I find her damage underwhelming, which is fine. She's a tank character. I find her tankiness underwhelming. I think her HP is a little too limited. And she's really not with the party very long. I think we're going to put her after Lyle's in the B rank. Are all these things going to be B rank? They might be. I think Phantasy Star 4 has a really good set of characters. Not a lot of uninteresting characters. Speaking of uninteresting characters, here's Grizz. Speaking of people who come in as tanks, Grizz comes in as a tank, and that's about all he can do. His role in battle, he's not in the party for a long time, but his role in battle is basically buff his attack and attack. Sit at the front of the party and take hits. His character and his character motivations make perfect sense. He joins because Zeal destroyed his town, and he leaves the force after Zeal's been destroyed because he has no reason to do so. He also wants to stay with his little sister. But as a character in battle, he's boring, and he's not very good at being a tank. Or he's not as good at being a tank as a tank we will talk about later. I'm going to put Grizz in C rank. And that's more a symptom of his limited use than anything else. This brings us to Han. Han has a bit of a special place in my heart in that he's kind of the first quote-unquote mage you get. I always consider him kind of a red mage. He's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. He heals, he has offensive magic. He doesn't really have many buffs. You can equip him with 2 knives, though he's not much of a melee fighter. But he's got a special place in my heart because he's in the early game party. Even the early game prior to Rika. Because I played Phantasy Star 4 originally through the Sega channel, what would happen is I'd start, my save file would get erased, so I'd have to start again. So my early characters, and especially Han, he's got a special place in my heart. Now after that rant, I think I'm going to place him just above Alice. I might actually make him an A rank character, except for the fact that he does start to become less effective right before he leaves, which is early in the game. I think it's right before Zeal or right after Zeal. Also, nobody takes on late game when you can make the choice for your characters. Also, his personality, he's a scholar. He's supposed to be smart, but he's just a little too unsure of himself for someone who has all the abilities that he does. He's kind of Gohan-esque without the moments of just the high moments that Gohan has. This brings us to Kira. And prior to my latest playthrough, I was probably thinking Kira to be a C or a low B rank character. I think the only thing that holds her back from being an A character is that she doesn't actually have much personality herself. I found her, when she came into the party, to be an excellent healer. Not Raja, but her Medai skill does full heals to everyone, including the androids. Her attacks are fine, her defense is fine. I just felt that she was fit like a really nice niche in the party. She's kind of like the replacement Alice, but she has more utility. She has Warla, which is a defense buff. She has offensive magic. I just find her to be a much better character than I thought. So, now we're at Raja. And prior to my latest playthrough, I would have put Raja at an S. He's in the game to be a white mage, and he's a great white mage. Unfortunately, that's all he is. He doesn't have much more utility. I found that in my playthrough, when I was at the end of the game fighting Profound Darkness, and even prior to that, it would basically be, does my party need heals? No, Raja's kind of useless. And what had happened at the end game is I had bought a bunch of Star Dues and Soul Dues, which kind of lessened my need for his healing abilities. But when he does join you the first part, and I also thought he was on my party for a lot longer than he was only really there for the first Dark Force fight. His healing is something you've never seen. No one really has access to Sar or his miracle abilities. He's just a breath of fresh air. You get him for the first time. Second time's not so much. And I know there are some people that are probably really like his personality. I find him annoying. Now Rika, if this was for the first 3/4 of the game, Rika would be an S tier character. I love her character as someone who's just coming out into the world and discovering all these new things. I played this game when I was 10, probably my first exposure to a cat girl. Lovely. Also, her melee abilities are pretty good until the end game. Her double slashes keep up with Chaz's cross slashes. I don't think they should, but they do until the end game when you get the Alcidian. She has Sanner and she has D-Ban, so she has buffs that are always useful. And her healing spells for Sar and Geyser, she's pretty useful. I keep her only as an A tier. I'm actually going to put her ahead of Rasha. I keep her only at that tier level because she does sort of suffer. Once Chaz gets the Alcidian, you tend to really notice that she's not the melee powerful character that she could be. And then once you have Raja or the Stardew's available, her healing utility also goes down, and she basically just becomes a buffer with a small amount of utility. Next up is Rune. Rune, I love Rune. When Rune first shows up in your party, when you're level 6 party, and he's level 17 or whatever he is, and he just runs through all the enemies. Nothing can withstand a Hune. Nothing can withstand a Gra. His face just looks so mysterious anime boy. You're automatically drawn into, oh my god. And lies, Alice kind of being smitten with him, kind of not. Him kind of being snippy with Chaz just kind of shows that he's above everybody, but also that he's kind of earned that entitlement. Then when he leaves and comes back, he's not the same Rune. He's not uber powerful because your party's caught up with him. And I do think he takes a little bit of a step back here. But he still has spells. He's still your best black mage character. He's still going to have the best access to Nawat and Gaiwat. He has that synergy with Chaz where you get FS. And then later in the game, his story points just takes you to a whole nother level when you find out that he's the embodiment of Lutz, and he's actually like, his entitled attitude is kind of like, oh, you really, really are entitled. But also, as the game progresses, and as Chaz progresses and becomes a better character, a better fighter, a better human, Rune starts to become a little less hard on Chaz, a little more caring about Chaz, and a little more complimentary about Chaz, and it's just like a little bit of a character progression that just tugs at your heartstrings a little more. We're going to take Rune. We're going to put him in A tier because he's always useful. He's either always useful or always uber powerful. And I love his character. I love his story. Just an excellent character. So let's talk about let's talk about Seth. Seth is D. He's a character. He's player controllable. I don't know how much time we have to spend on him. He's basically Han with a mustache and therefore evil. He's got some, corrosion. He's got some spells that are more dark material, but there's not a whole lot to talk about Seth. If he stayed longer, maybe we'd actually rank him higher, but even the cave that you're running through when you get him, you're not getting pushed, so you don't really even appreciate him as a character, and you don't really care what he can do in battle. Although I do have to say, some of his lines about how, oh, the party's so strong, and his just sort of uneasiness about him, but in like a nerdy sort of way, I tend to like his character. So this brings us to Ren, and I'm going to do this. Ren, S-rank character. Ren comes into your party as a tank. Well, what makes him a good tank? Well, he can heal himself. Not only does he recover every step he takes outside of battle, he recovers 1 HP, he also has a recover spell. That recover spell heals his HP up. Demi has this ability too, but what he has that Demi doesn't have is he has a very high HP pool. So, you know, when Demi takes it, Demi can take a couple hits just fine, heal herself. But when she gets a couple hits, you get worried about her. You're never worried about Ren. Ren is also very much a true tank. He gets some abilities that you're supposed to be excited about. They talk up Posy Bolt, how it's basically like a ship weapon that can destroy space stations. You use it in battle. It does damage, but it doesn't do much more than burst rockets. He's not going to go out there and set the world on fire with his damage abilities, but he doesn't need to. He's a tank. In addition to that, he has some party buffs. He has Barrier, which raises the magic defense, which also helps. And as a character, he's a little bland, but he also does a very decent job of sort of having an authority about him. Demi is subservient to him, I guess, in the android logic world. He's in charge of all of the systems in the solar system. Rika, who's looks up to him as a big brother, and that's kind of the role he takes on the team. Is just a person who you can trust to get things done. So that's our tier list. Leave any thoughts? Looking back on it, I think I might have Chaz a little too low, but also Chaz takes a bit to get going. He doesn't really become a great, oh my god, character until he gets the Alcidian in the end of the game. I feel bad having Alice so low, because emotions, but that is what it is. So leave a like, or a comment, or a subscribe, or anything. And we'll see you guys next time.